Rain fell in thin, sharp lines across the small, weathered dojo perched on the edge of the cliff. The wind tore at the roof tiles, whistling like a restless spirit. Inside, the wooden floor was slick with the moisture that had seeped through the old planks. But that was nothing compared to the storm brewing in the heart of the young man standing there. His name was Hiroshi. Barely 23, yet already hardened by years of loss. He was small for his age, wiry, with shoulders that carried more weight than his frame should allow. His eyes, dark and restless, darted around the empty room as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. But there was no one. Only silence, punctuated by the rhythmic drum of rain against the roof. Hiroshi's hands shook, not from the cold, but from anger. From shame. From the gnawing, unrelenting voice inside him that whispered, "You are weak." Always weak. It had started years ago, with the first great failure of his life. He had trained under Master Takeda, a stern old man with eyes like molten steel and a patience that could cut stone. Hiroshi had been eager, ambitious, a boy with fire in his veins. But ambition alone had not saved him. The day it all changed was the day of the duel. He had faced an opponent, a man 2 years older, taller, stronger. Hiroshi had been reckless, thinking skill alone would carry him through. But skill without discipline is like a sword without edge. The fight ended in humiliation. A single misstep, a fleeting lapse in focus, and Hiroshi had fallen. Not just to the ground, but into the bitter well of self-doubt. For weeks after, he could not look at himself in the mirror. Each glance showed him the same truth, fear masquerading as courage, weakness hiding behind ambition. His father had left him a lifetime ago, his mother's eyes had grown tired of hoping for him, and now, even his own reflection mocked him. That night, drenched in rain, Hiroshi had wandered through the cliffs above the village, the wind slicing across his face, tearing at his thin robe. He had looked down at the jagged rocks below and felt the allure of surrender. But then a thought struck him, a whisper from the stories his grandfather used to tell. Tales of Musashi, the legendary swordsman who became undefeated not through talent, but through relentless discipline. Musashi had trained his body and mind like no one else. He had lived in solitude, tested himself against the harshest conditions, and mastered the art of focus. Hiroshi did not know if he could ever reach that level, but the seed had been planted. If Musashi could become unbreakable, maybe he could too. Now, 3 years later, Hiroshi stood alone in the dojo, the rain outside painting the walls with streaks of gray. The smell of damp wood and old incense filled the room. His hands gripped a wooden sword, the grains slick beneath his fingers. Sweat ran down his temples, mixed with the rainwater dripping from the cracked ceiling. He had set himself a task that no one would understand. Each day, for the past 3 years, he had trained until his muscles screamed, until his lungs burned, until his body felt like it would break. And yet, every day, he rose again, driven by something deeper than ambition, something primal, a desperate hunger to transform weakness into something unyielding. Tonight, the storm mirrored his inner chaos. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his face with stark clarity. Hiroshi lifted his sword and practiced a kata he had memorized, a series of movements so precise and exacting that even a single misstep felt like failure. His arms shook. His knees buckled. His body begged for mercy, and then he heard a soft, almost imperceptible creak behind him. Hiroshi froze. The wind rattled the windows. The dojo seemed to shrink, the shadows thickening around him. He swung the sword in a practiced arc, expecting an intruder. But there was nothing. Only the echo of his own fear. He realized then that the real enemy had always been within him. Fear. Doubt. The relentless voice that whispered he was not enough. He lowered the sword, his chest heaving, and sank to his knees. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember the man he had once been, the boy who had fallen and nearly given up. And for the first time, he felt something new, a spark of defiance. Not loud, not fiery. Quiet, insistent. I will not break. The thought carried a weight, like a stone pressing into his chest. And yet, for the first time, it was not painful. It was steady, grounding. He stayed there for hours, letting the rain soak him, letting the night pass. And as dawn crept over the horizon, the clouds breaking into shards of gold and pink, Hiroshi rose that he felt the muscles in his body still trembling, his skin raw, but something else had awakened, a clarity, a resolve as sharp as the blade in his hand. He understood that discipline was not just training. It was endurance. It was facing yourself every day and refusing to bow. But even as the light touched the dojo, a shadow lingered in his heart. A memory, a failure he could not erase, a fear that whispered he was still not ready. The world outside the cliff was ruthless, and Musashi had not grown invincible without facing countless defeats. Hiroshi knew he was about to confront the hardest trial of all, not a duel with another man, not the swing of a sword, but the test of his own soul. Could he rise again and again, without faltering? Could he forge himself into something unbreakable, even when the world seemed bent on proving him weak? He gripped the sword tighter, the wood digging into his palms, and whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, I become more than I was yesterday. Tomorrow, I will face everything I fear, and I will endure." Outside, the wind howled. The rain pounded. But inside, Hiroshi's heart beat with a rhythm no storm could drown. And somewhere deep within, he felt it, the first stirrings of a discipline that could bend pain, fear, and failure into something powerful that he did not yet know the cost. He did not yet know the trials that lay ahead. But for the first time, he believed he could become unbreakable. And then, in the distance, a sound shattered the fragile calm. A single, sharp crack, like wood splitting under immense pressure. Hiroshi's eyes widened. He turned toward the door, heart hammering. Someone, or something, was coming. The rain outside seemed to still. The dojo held its breath. And Hiroshi realized, with a chill he could not shake, that his true test had just begun. The door to the dojo burst open with a deafening crack. Rain swept inside, cold and biting, soaking Hiroshi instantly. He tightened his grip on the wooden sword, every muscle coiled, every nerve alert. But it was not a man who entered. It was a figure draped in a dark, sodden cloak, moving with a silence that made Hiroshi's stomach knot. The stranger stopped in the center of the room, face obscured by shadow. A single glint of light reflected from steel, the edge of a real sword. Hiroshi's breath caught. His wooden practice sword suddenly felt fragile, a child's toy against something that could end him in a heartbeat. "Who are you?" Hiroshi demanded, voice stronger than he felt. His mind raced, calculating escape routes, strikes, chances, anything. The figure lowered the sword slightly. "I am your challenge," a calm voice said, smooth but sharp, cutting through the storm. "You want discipline, you want strength. Then prove it." Hiroshi's heart thundered. This was no mere lesson in kata, no simple test of endurance. This was the world itself, incarnate, demanding everything he had, or everything he thought he had. They faced each other, rain dripping from the ceiling onto the floor like a slow, relentless drum. Hiroshi raised his sword. The stranger mirrored him perfectly, stance precise, every movement deliberate. Time seemed to stretch. Each drop of rain, each heartbeat, became a countdown. The first strike came not from the stranger, but from within. Hiroshi's fear surged, visions of his past failures, his father's disappointed gaze, the shame of that duel that had haunted him for years. His hands trembled. He almost faltered, almost lowered his sword, almost ran, but he remembered Musashi. And in that memory, he found the faintest spark of something greater. Discipline is not courage. Discipline is action when courage is gone. He struck. The clash was sudden, brutal, and raw. The wooden sword met steel with a scream of wood and metal. Hiroshi stumbled back, pain shooting up his arms, but he did not fall. He swung again, and again, and again. Each strike carried more than strength. It carried desperation, fear, hope, and the unyielding will to endure. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had become meaningless. Rain poured, lightning flashed, and Hiroshi's body begged for mercy, but he refused. Every failure, every slip, every shiver of doubt became fuel. He fell to his knees countless times, only to rise again, hands raw, lungs burning, The stranger spoke only once, quietly, almost like a whisper in his mind. Discipline is forged in suffering, Hiroshi. Not in comfort. Not in victories. Only here, in the storm of your own weakness, will you find strength. Pain became his teacher. Sweat, blood, and the relentless rhythm of movement became his language. He realized he was no longer fighting the stranger. He was fighting every moment he had ever given up. Every failure, every mockery, every time he had whispered "I cannot," hours turned into a day. Or was it two? He had lost all sense of time. His body had become a map of his struggle, bruises and cuts like topography of battle, muscles screaming, lungs heaving, yet he could not stop. And with every strike, every parry, every fall, he began to feel something incredible: control. Not just of his sword, but of himself. He remembered the words of Musashi that his grandfather had once read to him. Do nothing that is of no use. Every action must serve your path. Hiroshi realized that discipline was not punishment. It was choice. Not a weight to bear, but a tool to wield. And yet, he still felt the shadow within, the doubt, the whisper of weakness that would not be silenced. On the third night, exhaustion claimed him. He fell, collapsed against the soaked wooden floor. Every bone, every sinew, every nerve ached with unrelenting truth. And in that exhaustion, a new awareness struck him: strength without humility is vanity. Discipline without compassion is cruelty. He had pushed himself to the edge, but had he truly mastered himself? The stranger lowered the sword and stepped back. You are stronger than before, he said softly, voice carrying over the roar of the storm. But unbreakable? That is another path. Hiroshi's chest heaved. He wanted to collapse, to give in to relief, but something in him refused. He understood now, this was not about defeating an opponent. It was about enduring, learning, transforming. Every drop of pain, every heartbeat of fear, every tremor of doubt was forging him into someone who could withstand the world. Not just a duel, but life itself. As dawn broke, the storm finally began to ease. The stranger sheathed the sword and turned, walking toward the door. Hiroshi called out, voice raw. Wait! Who are you? The figure paused, glancing back. I am what you must face, every day. Discipline is not a goal. It is a journey. And your journey has only begun. And then, with a gust of wind that shook the dojo, the stranger was gone. Hiroshi collapsed to the floor, shaking, bleeding, but alive. And in that silence, amidst the dripping rain and broken wood, he understood something profound. Discipline was not simply training. It was not ritual. It was the willingness to endure the unbearable, to face the self that wanted to quit, and to rise, again and again, until weakness had no place to hide. Tears mixed with rain as he lifted his sword once more. His hands still shook. His muscles still screamed. But he smiled. A small, raw smile. Not a victory over another, but a victory over himself. Tomorrow, the storm would return. Life would test him again. Doubt would creep back, failure would stalk him, and fear would try to claw into his heart. But now, Hiroshi had tasted something far stronger than hope. He had touched the edge of unbreakable discipline, and deep inside, he knew the hardest test was still ahead. The days passed like shadows in motion. Hiroshi no longer counted them. He measured time by the weight of his body and the steadiness of his breath. Each morning, he rose before dawn, before the village stirred, before the birds even dared to sing. The dojo, once a silent witness to his fear, now rang with the rhythm of his determination. Each strike, each stance, each kata a beat in the symphony of his transformation. Yet discipline, Hiroshi soon realized, was not about perfection. It was not about endless repetition or breaking one's body until it ached. It was about persistence when every instinct screamed to stop, to run, to surrender. He remembered the stranger's words, echoing in the hollow spaces of his mind. Discipline is a journey, not a destination. Weeks turned into months. Hiroshi's body hardened. His muscles became precise instruments of control. But more important, his mind shifted. The inner voice of doubt, the one that had haunted him since the day of his first defeat, had not disappeared, but it no longer commanded him. Instead, it had become a guide, a marker of where discipline was required most. Each time fear whispered, "You cannot," he struck back with quiet insistence. "I will point." One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon in streaks of crimson and gold, Hiroshi stood on the cliff above the village, his wooden sword in hand. The wind cut through him, but he welcomed it now. Where once it had been a threat, now it was a reminder. Life would always challenge, always batter, always demand. But he had learned how to meet it, how to endure it, how to rise again and again, without flinching. A young boy from the village approached him cautiously, eyes wide. "Hiroshi," he asked softly, How did you become so strong?" Hiroshi lowered his sword and looked at the boy, really looked. He saw in him the same spark of fear, the same hunger to rise above weakness that he had once carried. And for the first time, he understood that strength was not about being feared, or undefeated, or even admired. Strength was the quiet mastery of oneself, the ability to meet each day, each failure, each doubt, and endure. He knelt before the boy, hands resting on his own knees. "Strength," he said slowly, "doesn't come from never falling. It comes from standing every time you fall. Discipline isn't pain, it's choosing to do what must be done, even when you don't want to, even when it hurts, even when no one is watching." The boy nodded, but Hiroshi knew words alone could not teach this. Discipline, like fire, was learned through heat, through struggle, through countless moments of refusing to yield. That night, Hiroshi returned to the dojo. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and sharp, the wooden floors dry once more. He stood alone, sword in hand, and let silence fill the space around him. It was not emptiness, but a living presence, a mirror of his own growth. He thought of the stranger who had appeared during the first storm. Who had he been, really? A test? A figment of his fear? Hiroshi did not know. Perhaps it did not matter. The lesson had been learned: strength cannot be given. It cannot be handed down. It must be earned through relentless effort, through the willingness to face every weakness, and through the courage to endure. As dawn broke again, painting the sky in pale gold, Hiroshi sheathed his sword and stepped outside. The world awaited, unpredictable and ruthless as ever. But he was ready. Not because he had conquered an enemy, or mastered a technique, or gained fame. He was ready because he had conquered the self that had once been weak, timid, and uncertain. For the first time in years, Hiroshi smiled without hesitation. Not a smile of pride, not a fleeting joy, but a quiet, unwavering certainty. He had become unbreakable, not in body alone, but in spirit. The wind blew across the cliff, carrying the scent of rain, earth, and life. Hiroshi inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of his journey settle into him, solid and undeniable. Each scar, each bruise, each sleepless night had been a step toward this moment. And now, standing in the dawn, he understood the deepest truth of Musashi's method: unbreakable discipline is not forged in comfort. It is not found in talent, or luck, or the fleeting approval of others. It is forged in fire, tempered in pain, and strengthened through relentless choice. The choice to rise, again and again, no matter the odds. Hiroshi turned toward the horizon. The path ahead was long, uncertain, and full of trials. But he no longer feared it. The storm inside him had calmed, replaced by a steadfast rhythm of endurance. He had faced himself and emerged whole, and that, above all else, was strength beyond measure. He stepped forward. One foot. Then the next. Each movement deliberate, each breath steady. And with each step, Hiroshi carried with him the unshakable truth he had earned with blood, sweat, and tears: discipline is not a burden. It is freedom. Freedom to face life without fear. Freedom to endure. Freedom to become unbreakable. And in that freedom, Hiroshi found peace. The storm had passed. The journey had only begun. But Hiroshi was ready.